Hello everybody, my name is Edgardo Garrido Perez. I'm the scientific director and member of Llapis y Llavors Pencil and Seeds in Catalan. We are an NGO devoted to the study and conservation of both cultural and natural diversity. Therefore, it's a great pleasure for me to be invited to share with you some information. In concrete, we are going to say something about copyrights and the so-called intellectual properties. I have good news and bad news for you guys. You are biotechnology students, as far as I understand. Well, probably you prefer the bad news first. The bad news is that you are not inventing anything. You are not the first biotechnologists in the world. Your professors aren't even, and even the people who invented the term biotechnology as a new or relatively new a discipline in university levels are not inventing anything. The good news is that you can innovate by means of your biotechnological work, but it has an impact. You are not starting from zero. Let's have a look into some examples, and I will start formulating and insistently formulating an important question in many different ways is regarding the intellectual property of indigenous peoples in the wider sense of the word. For me, an indigenous person, what some people used in the past to call a native, it is not depending on the color of the skin of anyone or the place he or she is living outside Europe. For me, I prefer personally to use the classic dictionary definition of indigenous. Indigenous is someone born and grown on an area, in a terroir, we can say, coming from ancestors and other ancestors and so on, who were born and grown on this area. So from this point of view, the different peoples I have been working with per more than 20 years already, for about 20 years, a little bit more, include Panamanian indigenous peoples. I am Panamanian, and I start saying something about them because I am coming from there. have been learning a little bit from them. Include Mayans in Mexico, where I was doing my PhD studies in an excellent institute over there with fascinating research topics and researchers called the Centro de Investigación Científica de Yucatán. It is located in the core, perhaps, of the Zona Maya. People who were involved with many with the use of many different plant species, and until today they are doing it. For me, indigenous include, for example, the Quechua and other Amazonian groups, original groups, we used to call them like this in Latin America. For me, indigenous are people for the different ethnical groups living in Africa, Bedouins on the deserts, but also here in Europe you have indigenous groups. One of those groups are the Tyroleans. They are German speakers, but they are very different to the Germans. I have had the pleasure of cohabitating a little bit with them and sharing with them in South Tyrol. And probably you yourself may consider as indigenous guys even using, I don't know, suits and these particular dresses you use here in the Pasarela de Milano or whatever, but still many of you guys are born and grown here, and you are indigenous peoples here, descending from ancient Romans, Trojans, even Vikings and other groups, just as the current Nahuatl speaking peoples in Mexico are descendants of the Aztecs and in the very of the urban Aztecs. They were very rural but also very urban. So I am afraid that my first challenge for you guys here is this. Indigenous is anyone depending on the color of the skin, but living and descending from other people who were living in a terroir, and that means the people were interacting with nature in the place they were born and grown and developing throughout centuries and perhaps millennia their own idiosyncrasies, their own culture, their own ways of getting engaged with nature. Probably you know that many things started with hunting and gathering. If you go to any market here in Italy, you can buy fungi. Here I have a little, I don't know, champignons or something like that. My apologies, I'm a tropical animal, so I don't know many of the names. But let me ask you one question. How many people had to die in the past trying and eating, ingesting poisonous fungi in order to us today to be able to eat these champignons? Try to imagine. It is a collective knowledge that was growing throughout centuries, and many people had to die during the attempts, making the attempt. And now for us it's very easy to say, okay, I am going to eat I don't know, something with champignons in my pasta for tonight, for dinner. Hunters and gatherers were also interacting not only with fungi, but also with trees, including the ones producing nuts here in temperate countries. And again, if you are hungry, you must be careful because you cannot eat whatever. You must take care of what you are going to ingest. And once again, many people probably died in the past in order to their relatives and their fellows to realize that some plant species in the world are poisonous and others are edible. So probably you know that when the Ice Age was reaching its end, there was a great famine in many areas of the world, and there was a mass extinction of the megafauna, mastodons, giant sloths, and many other large animals were large packages of meat. Humans or the people on that time were hunting them, but once the overhunting and related to the change in climate was changing the habitat and pushing many of those species to extinction. A famine came, many people had to die, and they started to eat more from other things. I can imagine some of them desperate, trying to get something, trying to get calories. Somewhere in South America, the Andean region, they were trying some tubers. Tubers, as you know, are modified stems. Well, potato is the result from that. It was domesticated in the Andean area in Latin America, in South America. You find many different varieties of potatoes in Peru, for instance, even in archaeological sites. If you get it a little bit, you know, easy to move here, like, I don't know, with faults here, the skin is because it's getting dry. Interestingly, after getting dry, potatoes can survive for centuries, provided that no disease is affecting them. So low temperatures were contributing to preserve many different types of types of potato found by the archaeologists somewhere in Peru, and you can make comparisons and realize that the potatoes we receive here in Europe are just genetically partly representative of the huge variety of potatoes that were used by people over there. But this is a collective knowledge. Potatoes came to Europe, moved by the Spaniards, and then by Germans were introducing them in the German-speaking areas, and here in Italy, the Italians and so on, very recently, some 500 years ago, if you want. And still the knowledge accumulated for the development and the manipulation of different original tuber species and selecting them one generation after the other and the other in order to take advantage of the varieties producing more resulted in current potato. So potatoes, as you know, are a source of calories. Let's talk about another source of calories. All right. Oh yeah, I have a jam here, or a camote, or a boniato. They use to call it in Cuba. A sweet potato. It's a climbing plant, but once again, the process of selecting and selecting and selecting again one generation after the other to produce jams and potatoes and other plants. It took ages and implied the accumulation of knowledge by the indigenous peoples who were domesticating plants and animals. Now, by the way, another source of calories is rice. In China or somewhere in the Far East, the center of the world actually, China and the region over there in Asia, they were domesticating rice. And for us, it's very trivial now to eat many different varieties of rice. Some of them produced here in Italy. But it sounds like trivial now for us to say, "Ah, no, I am going to have a risotto or a paella or an arroz con pollo" for Panamanians, my country. Just saying that. But do you imagine how difficult it was to produce it? Do you imagine how difficult it is to peel it? You have these tiny little single grains attached to the infrurescence, let's put it that way, of rice, and probably they look similar to this plant we have here. You probably recognize it in Italian. I think it's called farro. I don't remember whether it is cevada or something like that. My apologies. I am born and grown in a tropical country, so I don't really know very well the names, the popular names of these cereals you have here. But this one is strongly covered by a kind of skin, and you have to peel it, or you can eat it with the skin, and then you take advantage of the fiber. But now we have been moving. Try to have a look from hunting and gathering, like learning which fungi are, which mushrooms are not poisonous and which others are edible. Now moving to the production, actively planting by means of the invention of agriculture that was occurring some 10,000 years ago in many different countries. Probably the most perfect of those cereals that was domesticated, not probably, surely, is corn. Here in Europe you find it in that way, but in some organic shops, in some bio-land and bio shops, you find them covered with the elote, as they used to call it in Mexico, which is the country where corn was domesticated. But try to imagine, it's very difficult to take any of those grains there, so you do not have to knock on the inflorescence for taking the grains outside, as it occurs with other cereals. You just must apply a hard effort using your own hands, and this has an advantage. You waste less grains, less calories during the process of taking the plant. Peeling it is very difficult to peel. Maize, corn, and then you get the ear and so on. It is very difficult, so the production demands a little bit more, considerably more effort compared to other grains, but you profit more because you are wasting less food. We will talk about these other the implications, some of the cultural implications of those inventions. But once again, there were some biotechnologies, if you want to put it that way, domesticating plants, domesticating animals, and some of them were here in Europe. You get, for instance, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite plants belonging to the same family and perhaps the same genus, but being used today for similar, still looking very different. Here we have an onion. If you cut it in a long section, you get something like that. But I have removed a little bit of the skin here and that here because it will probably remind you something like garlic here. Yeah, it's the very same, but each one of those leaf-like structures, they are actually related to the leaves. Ontogenetically, we say, is equivalent or yeah to this one here in the garlic, and they play basically the same role. They give flavor to the food, and also some other advantages you will probably know better than myself. But once again, there was someone in the past. There were many people, and grandparents of the ultra grandparents of you guys somewhere here in the world, inventing and discovering and trying and testing and making errors and choosing the ones preferred by themselves based on the profit and based on the flavor of the plants. Something similar occurs with cabbage and cauliflower. You get a cabbage here. I took this small one here. You know there are different colors. This one is full of I don't know xanthophylls and pigments, probably rich in vitamins. If you make a long section, you get something like that. In white, you are looking at the stem, and then in white and mainly in violet, you are getting the leaves. So the leaves look like here, right? You know, you as a botanist, you can probably find the nerves here and so on. Well, but in some varieties of the same ancestor, common ancestor for cabbage and so on, you have one where the flower became more important for users, for people, for the ancient biotechnologies developing or driving the evolution of those plants, and the result is cauliflower. And you have, so just in order to confirm that, you can have a smell here and there, and you will find something similar. That's why the chemicals inside are similar too, confirming that they had a common ancestor and then humans, where in this case, not taking so much advantage of the leaves, but of the flowers. So that's what we have here, and this is biotechnology in action. It is not nothing really new. In the academy, we PhD guys and professors have the custom of using new names for something already old. We are innovative people, of course, but we need to remember that someone else was doing the job first, and we are giving a continuation to that. In Mexico, for instance, just to turn back there, we have another big example. Yeah, this is a Solanaceae plant, and this one too. So we have peperoncino in Italian, pimenton, sweet, let's say non spicy, hot chili. Here is a hot one related to that one. You can imagine. Let me tell you something. You can find dozens and dozens of different varieties of chili, both sweet and hot chili, in Mexico, and they are related to the cultural diversity you find over there. More than 50 indigenous languages over there. In China is, by the way, something similar. And you have nowadays, thanks to modern university biotechnology, some varieties. Let's say when you go to the market, you find many guys, many peperoncini similar to this one, even in the size. There was something occurring somewhere in the world. The people were trying to get a healthy looking fruits and grains and so on, not necessarily looking like this, but like this, clean, smooth, brilliant, and so on. And that was one of the criteria used by humans now in recent days, propelling the evolution of all of those of plants like the peperoncino to evolve into the shape and flavor and forms they have today. Just to give you an anecdote, probably you know the book Como agua para chocolate, as water for chocolate, by Laura Esquivel. Is wonderful writer, is a Roman, and Laura mixes not only the history of families and people in the story, in the Roman, in the fiction she was writing, not so fiction in Latin America, but also there was a part when she said, well, if the onion doesn't make you cry, the food is not going to taste good. And nowadays you can go to the market and make the test probably at home, and you will never cry. You will rarely cry while peeling and cutting an onion. When I was a kid, and I am not as old as I look like, still many onions were making people to cry. So that's evolution in action. That's biotechnology in action. It started thousands of years ago, and you guys are giving continuation to the process. But there are ethical problems emerging from it. This is chocolate coming from cacao, a plant domesticated in Ecuador and then moving to the Mayan region in Mexico, and then moved from both South America and Mesoamerica, the Mexican world, into Europe, became chocolate. Is a plant from Latin America. It was introduced in many African countries, which has been clear cutting many hectares of forest just for producing cacao in order to you guys here in Europe, and probably including myself, to consume it as a dessert. I mean, just for having fun. So we have entering now, coming out from the problem of eating something to stay alive, into ethically complex problems like using products from one area for and non-directly affecting other people. One of those ethical implications is property rights, is intellectual property. Can anyone here in the world tell me the name of the guys who were discovering that some mushrooms are not poisonous? You will probably give the Nobel Prize to this man or woman of the caverns discovering that in the past. Can someone tell me the name and surname of the Latin American native peoples who were domesticating and converting this plant into the base of food for millions of persons after thousands of generations, hundreds of generations in their home countries, but also worldwide? Who will pay the Chinese or the Asiatic people who were domesticating rice? Who was the Mexican developing corn from Teosinte? And so on and so forth. So we nowadays have some companies profiting from biotechnologically modified plants and animals, earning tons of money, playing important roles in the gross product of different countries, and they are not paying the property rights to the indigenous peoples who were inventing the plants. So this is the kind of discussions we are going to have here in this course, and yeah, you are very welcome here. We make a first stop before continuing.